Dr. Anthony Harper here, blessed to be at the NRB convention in Dallas, Texas, with Richard Liverance with the Israel Tourism Department. And Richard, you have a special, it's great to meet with you. And you
nice
have a
to meet you,
message,
Anthony.
A special message for Evangelical Christians, Christians returning to Israel. And so many have been wanting to return to Israel. And because of this COVID-19 issue, there's been restrictions. So update our viewers about what's the latest with Israel government tourism department about evangelical Christians returning.
Well, of course, evangelicals are our greatest friends in Israel, and they always are the first ones that come back when tourism opens after any sort of event that Israel has, whether it's a conflict with Gaza or something else. We are trying to open Israel as this summer sometime. July 1st has been suggested. It's not official. And they are working on regulations to Israel to see whether or not we can open then. Some other things going on in Israel right now, so that they're in discussions when that can happen. But as soon as that happens, we have, I know, evangelical groups all over the United States and elsewhere who are eager to come back, and we are eager to have them. I actually am an evangelical myself, formerly a pastor. It's been my privilege to work for the State of Israel for the past 6 years. Simply promoting travel to Israel among the evangelical congregations, among pastors. I go to top Christian conferences and try to encourage people to go. It is a life-changing experience to go to Israel. It deepens your understanding of the text of Scripture, which is absolutely vital for Christians. It deepens your love and passion for the God of Israel, for the people of Israel, for God's plan, redemptive history, all of it. And so I'm a strong believer that pastors need to go, that they really haven't finished their theological training until they've been to Israel, and that they also take their churches, because of how life-transforming it is to go to Israel and spend even just a week or 10 days there, and to walk in the places where the biblical stories took place is absolutely fantastic. So we are eager to have evangelicals back into the land of Israel, and we believe it will happen this summer sometime, and we are working hard to make that happen because everybody misses them over in Israel.
Okay, so the policy now for Israel, for evangelicals to return, is what? Regarding vaccination, regarding also concerned about quarantine. What's going on? Right.
Well, when they actually lift, right now Israel is still restricted. You have to apply for a permit, and you can only do so if you're a foreign national, if you have family members living in Israel. But when they lift that restriction, hopefully on July 1st or sometime later this summer, they will lift the quarantine requirements. They will also talking about lifting the blood test that's presently necessary to enter Israel, a serological test to determine that you have the antibodies. We do believe, however, that they will continue at least through the end of this year to have to continue to require that all tourists coming into Israel be vaccinated, fully vaccinated. I know that that's an issue with a lot of folks. When we talk to pastors around the country and other Christian organizations, they're saying, about half of our people will get it and half of our people won't. So, but right now that's the requirement, and probably will be through the end of this year.
Okay, now about the COVID-19 testing. I've heard different stories about this. You mentioned the antibody issue. I take a test at the White House, a rapid test, like 15-minute response. Is that something that's going on that the Israel government is requiring?
Presently, the regulation is, this is what we anticipate will happen on or about July 1st, is that in order to travel to Israel, you'll need to get a PCR test, a COVID test, 72 hours in advance of flying. You will also prepay for a COVID test at Ben Gurion Airport, so that when you arrive, you have another COVID test, and assuming that's negative, then they will let you freely travel throughout Israel. They are removing what's presently in place, which is a serological test. You'll have to present a proof of vaccination, the card that you get from the CDC here. You have to show that. But other than that, they won't require a blood test to determine antibodies. So you'll be free to travel once you both have a negative COVID test.
And like you said, no quarantine for those that are
No
vaccinated.
quarantine, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do welcome people, to return to Israel. Of course, I've been there many times, and you're right. This really completes your understanding, your spiritual understanding of the Bible, because there's no place like Israel to really put it in perspective, where all these stories and events have happened. And I still have to return to go to Nazareth, but I haven't been there yet. And disturbing for me about Israel, withdrawing some administrative control over Bethlehem and Nazareth, Hebron, and other issues. So I don't know, have you experienced some hesitancy by evangelicals to return to those areas where Israel's not directly in administrative control?
I think everybody actually, I think initially has a little bit of concern about going to Israel. That's why we're here, really, to help people get over some of the obstacles. It's really much safer than the news cycles will allow you to believe. And when people get there, they think, I don't know what I worried about. Evangelicals are eager to go into the Palestinian territories, which would be Bethlehem primarily is heavily visited. Jericho is another place that's also heavily visited. Sometimes groups go or people go to Hebron, not so much, but Jericho and Bethlehem very much heavily visited by church groups and evangelicals are going there. And the Palestinian people are wonderful people. They love and welcome American tourists. They want you to spend your money there as well as in Israel. It's unfortunately sometimes people get the idea that the Palestinians are all terrorists or something. That's certainly not the case. These are wonderful families. They want to go about their jobs, raise their families, enjoy life, and they welcome visitors. So I've never found it dangerous to go into those places. If for some reason there is something that happens, they close the checkpoints in between. They don't allow tourism right now into those areas because of the COVID. Those are still closed to tourists, but so any tourists who are going now or this summer to Israel most likely will be able to tour throughout Israel, but not go into those territories until the Palestinian people are fully vaccinated. Israel is presently working on a program with the Palestinians in order to make sure that the Palestinian territories are also fully vaccinated, as Israel is, and so we expect then those border crossing areas will be opened up.
Well, another big question I think would be about Israel's presence in those areas like Bethlehem. Are there Israel police forces in Bethlehem or in Nazareth?
The Palestinian territories are really divided up into 3 zones, as an A, B, and C zone. And the A zone are the metropolitan areas. So, for example, Bethlehem, which is under full Palestinian Authority control. They have their own security forces there, their police forces there. So Israeli forces are not involved in the metropolitan policing. Then there's a B zone, which is somewhat of a shared, and those are lying outside of the urban centers proper. And that's sort of a shared control between Palestinian Authority and some IDF control. And then there's the zone C, which is full Israeli control. So you notice that when you go into Israel, that's really when people talk about settlements in the West Bank or in the Palestinian territory areas, that's in the zone C areas. So there is some Israeli control in that area, but in the downtown areas of Bethlehem, for example, Jericho, Ramallah, other places, Jenin, that's under full Palestinian Authority control.
Okay. Now, people want to get some more information. Where would they go?
They're welcome to visit our website. Our website is israel.travel, and we have all kinds of information there, specific information for Christians, for pastors who want to plan a trip. They are suggested itineraries. There's also our contact office. They're welcome to call our offices. We have offices throughout North America, Toronto for Canadians. We have New York, Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Excuse me, Los Angeles, where I am.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, it's a blessing to be here to talk about Israel. And please pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for Richard. Pray for Israel. These are very trying times, and I do pray that more people will be able to return back to Israel. It is such a blessing to be there.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Great to be with you.
Appreciate it.